Dr. John Lucio. I practice integrative medicine and pain management in Jefferson City, Missouri. And this is my wife.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jennifer Sue. I practice conventional gynecology and integrative medicine. If you've never subscribed, please do so. We love integrative medicine. We love being together as a community during these really tough times because we kind of get to talk with each other and find out your concerns, and you comment below whatever questions you have. The coronavirus pandemic that's going on. We are really wanting you to know we will all get through this as a international community. Everybody's in the same boat, lots of fears, lots of anxiety, and we will pull through. Even our lives have changed. You know, I have not had my office open now for a complete week. Tell them what's happening when you go into the hospital.
Well, my clinic is attached to the hospital, and so now we're screening patients when they come in and checking their temperatures and doing just a quick interview to see if they can actually enter the hospital, and they're restricting the number of visitors. And just Friday, they just announced that they're going to stop doing any elective surgeries for two reasons. One, they don't want a transmission of any COVID virus, or they have concerns about blood supply. The donors have gone down.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, just basically our lives changed. You know, we go in the grocery store, we can tell. But we want you to, as a community, just hang in there together. We know a lot of people are not having incomes. They're worried about the next paycheck. And we're all in it together. So there's always hope that you're not alone. So back to our subject today. It's about the Atkins Diet.
Yeah, and last week I announced that we were going to run a series on different types of diets. And the reason I'm doing this is because there's so much information out there. And on YouTube, if you open up YouTube and you start typing Atkins Diet or any kind of diet, you're going to have a fair number of people on there in support or even against the diets. And almost all of them they're on a chalkboard or some kind of eraser board. And they have these biochemical pathways to help support their particular opinion. And these are great if our bodies were test tubes, but they're not. Unfortunately, we're all genetically different. We all respond to different diets in different ways. Some people do great with Atkins Diet, some people do not. So the next few weeks, we're going to pick a particular diet, and we're going to go through how it became about and what are the important facets about it, and describe what it is, and some of the risks in terms of following that diet. Now, you're going to figure out as we talk about in the next coming weeks about different diets, I am not a dietary extremist. I tend to believe that more of a rounded diet is probably the best for most people. And that's just the way it is. And you're going to see with a lot of the things we discuss, a lot of the evidence points to that fact. So let's just talk about the Atkins Diet. Well, what is it? Well, it began Dr. Atkins about approximately 50 years ago. He's a cardiologist, and he came up with this diet where he proposed that using eating high animal fat and low carbohydrate diet is actually good for you. And so it just kind of took off from there. And it was interesting because at the time we were talking about low fat as the cause of a lot of heart disease. And his was kind of a very revolutionary opinion. And throughout the years, the Atkins Diet has modified itself a little bit. I'll talk about that later in our discussion. So what is it about the low carbohydrate, high protein diet that's important? Well, one, it's considered a ketogenic diet. Now, what is that exactly? You'll hear that term tossed around a lot. And basically what it is when you drop a person's dietary intake of carbohydrate, they have less glucose. So they produce more ketones because they actually burn more fat. And that's how you lose the weight. And the Atkins Diet is actually quite very effective in losing weight. In fact, in some of the studies, if you took overweight individuals and they compared them to taking just a regular low-calorie diet versus the low-carbohydrate, high-protein diet, the Atkins Diet folks did lose a considerable amount of weight. Unfortunately, there are some concerns about it because when you use the Atkins Diet, you actually create what is called a metabolic acidosis in your body. And what it is you do become a little bit more acidic in your blood. And so what the body does, it says, well, I've got to buffer that somehow. And the way that it does it is by using calcium, and it takes actually calcium from our bones, and so that's a risk as well. The other interesting thing about the Atkins diet, because you would say, well, if we're using all these animal fats and dairy and so on, is it going to raise our cholesterol profile? And in fact, it does not, which is very interesting. And as we mentioned when we had our discussions about fats, these type of fats are called saturated fats. So they include animal fat, dairy, cheese, those kind of things. And so it's just really remarkable that it does not. So that kind of flies in the face of conventional wisdom a little bit, and some people actually criticize the Atkins diet because of that. Some of the big proponents of the Atkins diet always say, well, it does improve chronic diseases, conditions such as diabetes, heart disease, and hypertension. And yeah, it does. In fact, there's some studies that show that it does do all those things. However, it does it by simply weight loss. And if you take any diet and you drop someone who's very overweight, you drop their weight, they're going to have the same benefits. So it's really unclear how much benefit the Atkins diet plays a role outside of just the weight loss itself. So that's very interesting. And there's some critics of the Atkins diet that say high animal fat actually increases atherosclerosis, which is plaques in the cardiac arteries. And because when animal fat is cooked, it creates what is called oxidized cholesterol, which actually can lead to atherosclerosis. So there is a risk there, and you have to use risks and benefits whenever you're using this diet. I really recommend that you talk to your physician about it. Not only does it actually have a risk for causing heart disease, supposedly, according to the critics, but it can also increase some cancers, increase your incidence of cancers. So, however, there is a lack of studies that show long-term detrimental effect from the Atkins diet, because most of these diets, even though the Atkins diet has been around for a long time, most of these studies that involve these diets are less than 2 years old. So there's really not a lot of long-term evidence yet, which is really surprising. But as time goes on, I think you're going to see that come out. I think in most people's opinion, when I talk to many physicians and some of the nutritionists, Atkins diet really is not sustainable long term. You almost have to understand that if you follow it the way it was intended, you actually run the risk of some vitamin deficiencies and chronic constipation, and even some of the modifications now to the newer dietary recommendations for Atkins diet. They do involve vitamin supplements and some nutrients, which they hadn't in the past, and actually they're proposing using some phytocarbohydrates, which is plant-based carbohydrates, and they more so than they did in the past. So they're starting to recognize that there are some limitations to their original recommendations. So the interesting thing about the Atkins diet is most effective with people that were insulin resistant. That means that people that had fasting insulin levels greater than 15. Now, unfortunately, you're going to find a lot of conventional physicians do not measure insulin levels. They'll measure fasting glucose. So if you're discovering that when you're on the Atkins diet, you're really not losing a lot of weight, you may be one of those individuals that are not insulin resistant. And so that may be one of the reasons why it's not working for you. At the beginning of starting on the Atkins diet, some patients do complain of fatigue, dizziness, abdominal pain as well, and constipation, because you're at the beginning of the Atkins diet, the first 2 weeks typically, you're actually severely restricting carbohydrates. You're just eating high protein animal fat, and you don't have that added fiber in your diet. And as time goes on, there's another phase to the Atkins diet, which actually starts to slowly introduce some of these back in, and they actually, during their maintenance phase, it's a little bit more tolerable for people. There are some issues that go along with actually getting used to the diet itself and being able to maintain it. So just in closing, the Atkins diet originally began as strictly low carbohydrate, high protein, usually from animal fat and dairy. And actually, as time has gone on, it's actually started to incorporate some other carbohydrates, plant-based carbohydrates, and actually some vitamins and nutrients. Where they've realized that there are some deficiencies that can result if you strictly adhere to the classical Atkins diet. So it helps with weight. There's no doubt about that. Some of those studies do show. Now, whether it maintains that weight loss is another area of discussion. You'll have some studies show that it does, some that it doesn't. And using the Atkins diet, you do have to weigh the risks and benefits of starting a low carbohydrate and a high animal fat diet, because there are some pluses and minuses. The pluses are that it does result in weight loss in most individuals. The negative sides are that it can cause some issues with accelerating heart disease, and some people believe it can increase your incidence of cancer. So keep that in mind.
Have you ever done the Atkins diet?
Actually, it's funny you mentioned that. The more I read about the Atkins diet, when we first read it a couple of years ago, I discovered that I had been doing that intermittently. Sometimes I'll go for weeks with just eating animal product, protein, and phytonutrient carbohydrates without using any carbohydrates at all, or just very minimal amounts. I don't think I ever did that exclusively. There's always some fudge factor in it, or I cheated a little bit, but it came close.
Why did you do it?
I don't know, it just seemed to, I felt better eating it.
I've never done it. If you guys have ever done Atkins and you have some experience you want to share with other people, comment in the comments below. Stay tuned to our next video, which is going to be how to deal with just the stress and the kind of chronic anxiety that we're all experiencing due to the coronavirus pandemic. We really appreciate our community, and if you haven't subscribed, please do so. Hit that notification bell so you know when we've uploaded our next video, and we'll see you again in our next video.
So long, everybody.
We are so happy you're here with us again. It's your J&J House Call with Kona. I go, you're not Corona, you're
All right,
Kona.
cut.
What?
Not gonna. I don't know if I want the playing around
It's
stuff.
good.
too.
It works. Seriously, trust me.
Okay,
Trust me,
just
trust me,
can we
trust
just go
me.
a middle
Trust
ground
me.
here?
No, don't hold me back.